I'm Dee Michael once again, and today I'm going to be talking about an inmate from Clackamas County named Tim Sundin. He was arrested in 1987 for the murder of, I believe it was Bob Elledge, but the last name is Elledge. He was murdered in 1987, and Tim and I have become friends for the last 3 or 4 years, and he's written me a lot, and so I pretty well know his case, but I'm not going to swear to it as total authenticity because I was not there. But he tells me that he was dating a girl by the name of Evelyn Partlow. She had an older brother named Robert Partlow Jr., and he was visiting at the Partlow residence in Clackamas County out of Oregon City, Oregon, and one night he was staying there in a camper, and Robert Partlow and an associate of his came and asked him to go for a ride with him. So he went for a ride, and then they let him know that they wanted him to help them find where Elledge lived, and he realized that they had some animosity towards Elledge, and I'm pretty sure that Elledge was a drug dealer. So they drove around, and Tim acted like he couldn't find the place. It was dark, he couldn't find their house, and so finally they gave up and they went back. Well, the next night he was in the camper again, and these two same guys came, and they told him that he was going to go with them and he was going to show them where Elledge lived, because they were going to get whatever it was that this guy supposedly had, whether it was drug money, whether it was drugs, he didn't know. But he figured that it was something that this Elledge stole from him or something. And they held a needle, a syringe to his neck, and they told him that it had horse tranquilizer in it, and that if he didn't show him where Elledge lived, that they would shoot him and he'd be dead because it was horse tranquilizer. So yeah, he did show him where Elledge lived. Elledge was not home. So they all went in the house, and those two other guys was ransacking the house, angrily looking for something. But they told Tim, I think Tim was maybe 19 years old at the time, they told him to stand by the door, and if this guy came home, to hit him with this club. And the guy did come home, and Tim did hit him. He's admitted he did hit the guy with this club, and the guy went down. And then Partlow jumped on the guy, shot him with the horse tranquilizer syringe, wrapped electric cord around his neck, put his foot in the middle of the guy's back, and pulled up on the electric cord until the guy was dead. So yes, Tim was there at the time of the murder. Well, it was found out that Tim was present at the time of the murder. I don't know how, because I haven't seen all the legal documents. But they did arrest Tim and Robert Partlow. Both of them were in jail. There was a third guy who was a co-defendant named Tony Wick. He was not behind bars at the time. So the DA and I don't know who else, but they were telling Tim that he had to help them get Wick off the streets because Wick was a very dangerous man. And they even took him to visit Evelyn Partlow at the district attorney's office on more than one occasion, and they let them be alone for an hour or two at a time in the district attorney's office, where they participated in sex and whatever else they wanted to do. And then they told him that they had to get Wick off the streets because Tim's mother and father was getting death threats from a person that was saying that his little sister's lives were in danger. I have seen the affidavit that his mother wrote to the courts, that they were getting death threat telephone calls. And also a sister, I believe, of his that was married and had a couple of small girls was also getting death threat telephone calls from some man telling them that if Tim didn't go along, keep his mouth shut, and plead to whatever he had to, but if he didn't keep his mouth shut, that his little sisters or his nieces could be dead. So he actually thought that Tony Wick, I believe was his name, was out there making these phone calls. So he was willing to do anything to get that guy behind bars because he thought the guy was actually a danger to his family members. So he lied. He gave false witness against Wick, and he got Wick arrested and convicted. Well, Tim was also, he had been told during this time that if he pled to lesser charges that they would not bring murder charges against him. They would only bring charges of burglary, and that he'd probably be out in less than 10 years. So he went along with that, and he ended up convicted. But when they convicted him, it ended up that he was convicted of murder. Not only burglary, but he was also convicted of murder also. He was convicted of murdering Elledge by blunt force trauma. Well, they took him away. He was in Two Rivers, I believe, prison. He was over in Eastern Oregon quite a bit. He was in prison for 17 years when happened to be that Wick was put in the same prison with him, I believe at Snake River, over in Ontario. And they got to talking, and so Wick was saying, why did you lie against me? Why, you know, they got to talking about why Tim had testified against Wick, when Wick wasn't the one that murdered the guy. So anyhow, I found out that Tim had been lied to get him to testify against Wick. And so Wick, then in 2005, he filed a motion to get discovery on all of Tim Sundin's testimony and everything that went on in his conviction, because Tim was the one that had testified against him, and he now realizes that Tim was coerced, bribed with sex and everything, to testify and get Wick convicted. So now Tim Sundin is willing to help Wick prove his innocence, and at that time was the first time that Tim Sundin found out that Robert Partlow Jr. had also been convicted of murdering Elledge after he was convicted. This is the first time he found out that Partlow had actually been convicted of killing Elledge with horse tranquilizer and strangulation with an electric cord. So my question is, how can two guys be convicted of murdering the same guy in two different manners? I mean, you know, you can't kill the person twice. So Tim has been trying to get into the courts, well, since 2005 to prove his innocence. He has proof now that they had proof of his innocence. I mean, Wick is telling them that the DA in Clackamas County and all those people knew that Tim was not guilty of murder, but they convicted him anyhow. So I don't know why they do these things. Maybe it's because they get a lot of money off the heads of every convicted prisoner that's convicted. But Tim has been very distraught over the years. He has numerous times tried to commit suicide. He has cut his arms. He has tried to dig his ligaments out of his arms just to kill himself, because it is such a miserable experience being in prison, especially as an innocent person. I have dealt with a lot of prisoners, and the ones that are actually guilty, it's easier on them than the innocent prisoners. It's very hard on the innocent prisoners. So something needs to be done about the fact that, well, you just can't kill the same man twice with two different means of murder. And now the actual murderer has only got, I think he served 12 years behind bars. So he had been out of prison before Tim ever found out the guy had actually been convicted of the murder of Elledge. He's still a free man as far as I know. Wick is still behind bars. Now, why is it that Tim Sundin and Mr. Wick are still behind bars when the actual murderer has been free for 10, 12 years? These things just don't make any sense. But I guess they know that the innocent prisoners are going to turn around and file suit when they can prove their innocence. So they don't let them be free. They just don't turn them free, because they know when they get out they're going to file suit against the corporate state of Oregon. And every attorney, every judge, every AG, district attorney are all attorneys. They all belong to the Oregon State Bar. They have to. They have to pay their dues every month. That pot of gold just gets fuller and fuller and fuller. And they all are protecting their interest in that pot of gold in the middle of the Oregon State Bar. Their total life depends on that pot of gold. And so they're not going to let somebody out that's going to sue and take some of that out of that pot of gold. So that's the only reason I can think that they would keep innocent men behind bars when they know they're innocent. To keep them from suing. Keep them from getting some of that gold. Actually, the Oregon State Bar, I believe, was set up in 1936, somewhere around there, to protect the citizens against corrupt attorneys. That system has totally morphed into a protection for corrupt attorneys. So you can bet on it that when you sue a corrupt attorney for stealing your funds or for, trying to rape you or whatever, I'm not saying they do those things, but if you try to sue an attorney, the Oregon State Bar will appoint an attorney to defend that corrupt attorney. And that's why they do it, because it's a lot of money. I hope somebody out there can join us in trying to free provably innocent prisoners. Thank you.